Hello, and welcome to the second to last portion of the Scrolls of Ezekiel. What a journey this has been. So exciting to know that we have eaten these scrolls quite literally week after week. And prior to this, we were in Isaiah, and I mean all of the minor prophets in between that Liz guided us through as well. It's just been such a beautiful journey after if you have followed us for any amount of time, you know that it wasn't recorded, but we started with Torah portions, and that led us here where we are now. So it's just so beautiful to see all of the connections within the scriptures and see how alive the word truly is. I wanted to yes, definitely have come a long way. So I wanted to go into a little bit of an introduction tonight because with what we covered last week, there was an article that I came along and I want to read it because it kind of sheds light on the prince that is being spoken of in chapters 44 through 46, that we know there is a foreshadowing of Messiah, but there is also someone else that is being referenced here. So we are going to get into some connecting precepts as we read the chapter itself, but I really did want to read through that article so that, we gain a better understanding as we go through these two chapters tonight. Abba willing, next week we will be completing the book of Ezekiel in its entirety. And yeah, it's very, very exciting, very heartwarming to know that we've made it through. We've made it through, we've pushed through, and I mean it's only up from here. We'll see what's in store. I know that my sister Liz will begin to facilitate once again, and bringing the fire of the word of knowledge, and rightly dividing the scriptures as we always endeavor to do. So, with that being said, um, who is the prince in Ezekiel 44 through 46? I want to read this precept here, Hebrews 7:12 through 14, that says, "For when there is a change in the priesthood, there is necessarily a change in the law as well. For the one of whom these things are spoken belonged to another tribe, from which no one has ever served at the altar. For it is evident that the Adon was descended from Judah, and in connection with that tribe, Moses said nothing about priests." So who is being spoken of here? We're making a differentiation between the Levitical priesthood and the tribe of Judah because of the fact that our Messiah came through the line of Judah through David, but the high priests were of the line of the Levites. So, or the Levites. So, it's clear that there was obviously a transfer of the priesthood, and I encourage you to read through the book of Hebrews. Liz on her channel does have a great study that goes in depth about the book of Hebrew, or reading through the book of Hebrews line by line and breaking the scriptures down, making connections, where you're able to see that transference from starting with the Melchizedek priesthood, going into the physical Levitical priesthood with the sacrificial system, and then transferring back into the order of Melchizedek through Messiah, and once again becoming spiritual, not eliminating the laws that were established through the Levitical priesthood or written through the Levitical priesthood, but no longer having that sacrificial system because our Messiah became the ultimate sacrifice. But we do have just a note here that for a prince to offer sacrifice, he must also be a priest, which is why last study we made all of these connections about Messiah himself being the prince that is spoken of. And again, I don't take away from that because it's evident that he is the one who is being spoken of in many of the precepts in chapter 44. But we do have now an introduction in chapter 45 where the prince is making atonement or sacrifices. So why would our Messiah be the one? Oh, what did I do? I stopped screen sharing. Let me go. Sorry, guys. So why would our Messiah be the one making the sacrifices if he became the ultimate sacrifice? So in many ways, Ezekiel's description, and now I'm reading through this summary that I tried to condense a little bit. The summary that I read that kind of breaks things down in a really cool way. In many ways, Ezekiel's description of the temple, the prince, and the sacrifices feels like a parallel otherworldly storyline. It's a strange comparison, but in the last study, I noted the strong messianic imagery in the vision of the Prince of Jerusalem coming to the temple through the east gate and offering sacrifice. There were some doubts, we discussed whether or not this was truly Yasha, because as we'll see in chapter 45, the prince offers a sin offering for himself and for the people. So the website gotquestions.org kind of breaks something down here too. It says, finally, and most importantly, the prince in Ezekiel 46 is not the Messiah. Rather, he is the overseer of Jerusalem during the Millennial Kingdom. He is not Yasha himself, but he serves under Yasha's authority. We know that this prince is not the Adon because he must make a sin offering for himself as well as for the people. It says it in verse 22, which we'll read in a minute. On that day, the prince is to provide a bull as a sin offering for himself and for all the people of the land. Whoever the prince is, he is a man with a sin nature that must be atoned for. So while we agree that this isn't Yasha himself, there's two big questions that we haven't, or in reading this, I honestly couldn't find the answer for it either. But it begs the question: is Ezekiel describing Passover, the Day of Atonement, or another feast, or something else? Verse 21 also says, in the first month, on the 14th day of the month, you shall celebrate the feast of Passover, and for 7 days unleavened bread shall be eaten. So we see again that the feasts are being referenced in this chapter as well. This is the date that Leviticus 23:5 mandates. Passover happens in the spring. Here's where things get a little bit tricky as well. Ezekiel is clearly referring to Passover, but the offering he prescribes for the prince to offer is the one in Leviticus 16, which is appointed for the Day of Atonement. According to verse 6, in Leviticus 16, Aaron shall offer the bull as a sin offering for himself and shall make atonement for himself and for his house. On Passover, a lamb is sacrificed, and it is to be done by every household. On the Day of Atonement, a bull is sacrificed. So Passover is a spring feast. The Day of Atonement happens in the fall. Finally, Ezekiel goes on to say that for 7 days of the feast in verse 23, of chapter 45, he shall provide as a burnt offering to the Adon 7 young bulls and 7 rams without blemish on each of the 7 days, and a male goat daily for a sin offering. None of the appointed feast days on the calendar prescribe 7 bulls and 7 rams for 7 days. Numbers 28 prescribes 2 bulls, 1 ram, and 7 lambs for each of the 7 days of Passover or unleavened bread. The Day of Atonement specifies 1 bull, 1 ram, and 7 lambs for 1 day. And the only places in scripture where 7 bulls and 7 rams are sacrificed are in Job 42:8, where Job makes an offering for his children. So that's a side note. Silvi, you raised your hand. You wanted to say something?
Do you have a screen share or that
No,
you're
because
reading through? Oh, okay.
I have it written like in my notes. I tried to
Okay.
condense it. Yeah, I'm sorry.
I was just making sure because I'm like, is she reading? Because I know you put the screen up, but it
Yeah.
wasn't showing. Okay, cool.
Yeah, because I
But
can't have.
Steph, you can share your notes later in the chat too.
Okay, yeah, I will. I will, absolutely.
But this makes so much sense with what we're talking about.
Yes, and there's more. There's more. It's so interesting. I couldn't help but read it through to you guys. Okay, so Numbers 23, 1 through 29. So this is if you remember the story of Balaam. So where Balaam seems to be trolling Balak, First Chronicles 15:26, when the ark was returned to Jerusalem, and in Second Chronicles 29:21, when Hezekiah cleansed the temple after his father Ahaz had shut it down. These are different scenarios where 7 bulls were prescribed for the offering to be made for atonement. Most importantly, the high priest, not the prince, is the one that is to make the sacrifice for the people. Which brings us to the second big question. Why is the prince making sacrifices? Throughout the Bible, bad things happen when a human king attempted to do what only the priest was supposed to do. We have Saul, who lost the kingdom when he did it in 1 Samuel 13, 8 through 14, and King Uzziah, who got leprosy when he did it as well, and that's in 2 Chronicles 26, 16 through 21. So it's not complicated. Kings ruled civilly on the Most High's authority, and Levites and priests administered sacrifices. There was a distinct difference here. Israel actually had a good model for separation of church and state. Only it was only intended to keep the state from overstepping its bounds, not to divorce religion from civil rule. So in a nutshell, for a prince to offer a sacrifice on behalf of the people, he had to also be a priest. And that doesn't happen under the Aaronic priesthood. It's just a fancy term for the priestly line descended from Aaron. Priests came from the tribe of Levi, and every king of Israel after Saul came from the line of Judah. There was one priest king in the Old Testament. So we've got to go back all the way to the beginning to find him. His name is Melchizedek. And we'll read in the book of Jasher that that king was Shem, one of the sons of Noah. And he shows up in Genesis 14 to bless Abraham. And Abraham rescued his nephew Lot from his enemies, the king of Sodom, and came out to meet Abraham. So apparently he wanted to negotiate Abram's share of the spoils of the war. And with no preamble or further explanation, we meet a figure named Melchizedek. And this is who Abraham gives an offering to, because essentially it was like a family feud that was taking place. I'm sorry, let me check the chat. And Liz says, and this makes perfect sense since we are back to the order of Melchizedek. Exactly. So we'll read that precept in Genesis 14 in a minute as well. Okay, so finally, so why the otherworldly parallels? Why do we have the two side-by-side things? So remember that in the sense of like a comic book, it's sometimes where if you think about, for example, the Marvel comic books, they have the multiple worlds, right? They have a parallel universe where they save people, the people of the earth, and then like another area where there's darkness and destruction. So maybe this is why Ezekiel's temple vision doesn't quite match up with there being a physical prince making sacrifices who is not a priest. It has to be one and the same, right? So the almost but not quite details of the vision might be to alert the reader that this is something new, that salvation for the Israelites or the Judahites and for the rest of the earth would not come from the Levitical sacrificial system. It wouldn't come from a temple built with human hands. The hero would come from a different place. We only see Melchizedek one more time in the Old Testament in Psalm 110:4, and we're also going to read that in a little bit. But in the New Testament, in the book of Hebrews, he shows up again in a big way. So we have Hebrews 7:1-3, that says, "For this Melchizedek, king of Salem, priest of the Most High Elohim, met Abraham returning from the slaughter of kings and blessed him. And to him Abraham apportioned a 10th part of everything. He is first, by translation of his name, King of Righteousness. And then he is also King of Salem, that is, King of Peace. He is without father or mother or genealogy, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but resembling the son of the Elohim, he continues a priest forever." So Hebrews calls Messiah a priest forever on the order of Melchizedek. That's because, like Melchizedek, Yashah is both priest and prince. He is a priest, but not from the line of Aaron. He is a king, but one who is able to make sacrifices. Melchizedek is king of Salem, that is, king of peace. A prince is the son of a king. And so, what would you call the son of the king of peace? You would call him the Prince of Peace, which we see in Isaiah 9:6. So Yashaya HaMashiach, who, just as Melchizedek, gave Abraham bread and wine, gives us the bread of his body and the wine of his blood. Yasha is the hero from another reality, but we have the physical prince, Melchizedek, who will make those sacrifices. He alone, though, Messiah, is the sovereign who could offer a sacrifice. So I just, again, wanted to share this because there was a lot of questions during our last study because of the fact that this book is so profound and spiritual. Obviously, there's a lot that could be left for interpretation. I don't have all of the answers. I don't know how accurate this information might be. I feel though that, according to the Holy Spirit, this is what it is. And hopefully, as time passes, we will just continue to gain more understanding, but we'll reveal it, and we'll just continue to prepare ourselves to be a people made ready, wives with spotless garments, or brides with spotless garments, awaiting the return of our King. With that being said, we can go ahead and jump into chapter 45 and see what Abba has for us tonight. Sylvie, you can read through the entire chapter.
Okay. I'm going to read from your screen share.
Okay, I'll be following.
Okay. Moreover, when you divide the land by the lot into inheritance, you should set apart a district for the Most High, a holy section of the land. Its length should be 25,000 cubits, and the width 10,000. It should be holy throughout its territory all around. Of this, there should be a square plot for the sanctuary, 500 by 500 rods, with 50 cubits around it for an open space. So this is the district you should measure, 25,000 cubits long and 10,000 wide. In it shall be the sanctuary, the most holy place. It should be a holy section of the land belonging to the priests, the ministers of the sanctuary, who come near to minister to the Most High. It should be a place for their houses and a holy place for the sanctuary. An area 25,000 cubits long and 10,000 wide shall belong to the Levites, the ministers of the temple. They should have 20 chambers as a possession. You should appoint as the property of the city an area 5,000 cubits wide and 25,000 long, adjacent to the district of the holy section. It should belong to the whole house of Israel. The prince shall have a section on one side of the other of the holy district and the city's property, and bordering on the holy district and the city's property, exceeding westward on the west side and eastward on the east side. The length should be side by side with one of the tribal portion from the west border to the east border. The land should be this the land should be his possession in Israel, and my prince should no more oppress my people, but they shall give the rest of the land to the house of Israel according to their tribes. Thus says the Adon Elohim, enough, all princes of Israel, remove violence and plundering, execute justice and righteousness, stop dispossessing my people, says the Most High Elohim. You should have honest scales, an honest ephah, an honest bath. The ephah and the bath shall be the same measure, so that the bath contains 1/10 of a homer, and the ephah 1/10 of a homer. Their measure should be according to the homer. The shekel shall be 20 gerah, 20 shekels, 25 shekels, and 15 shekels shall be your mina. This is the offering which you shall offer. You should give 1/6 of an ephah from a homer of wheat, and 1/6 of an ephah from a homer of barley. The ordinance concerning oil, the bath of oil, is 1/10 of a bath from a cor. A cor is a homer or 10 baths. for 10 baths are a homer. And 1 lamb should be given from a flock of 200, from the rich pastures of Israel. This shall be for grain offerings, burnt offerings, and peace offerings, to make atonement for them, says the Adon Elohim. All the people of the land should give this offering to the prince in Israel. Then it should be the prince's part to give burnt offering, grain offering, and drink offering at the feasts, the new moons, the Sabbath, and all the appointed seasons of the house of Israel. He should prepare the sin offering, the grain offering, the burnt offering, and the peace offering to make atonement for the house of Israel. Thus says the Adon Elohim, in the first month, on the first day of the month, you should take a young bull without blemish and cleanse the sanctuary. The priest should take some of the blood of the sin offering and put it on the doorpost of the temple, on the four corners of the ledge of the altar, and on the gatepost of the gate of the inner court. And so you should do on the 7th day of the month for everyone who has sinned unintentionally or in ignorance. Thus you should make atonement for the temple. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month, you should observe the Passover, a feast of 7 days. Unleavened bread shall be eaten. And on that day the prince shall prepare for himself and for all the people of the land a bull for a sin offering. On the 7th day of the feast, he should prepare a burnt offering to the Most High, 7 bulls and 7 rams without blemish, daily for 7 days, and a kid of the goats daily for a sin offering. And he should prepare a grain offering of 1 ephah for each bull and 1 ephah for each ram, together with a hint of oil for each ephah. In the 7th month, on the 15th day of the month, at the feast, he should do likewise for 7 days, according to the sin offering, the burnt offering, the grain offering, and the oil.
Okay, thank you so much, Sylvie. So, lots of instructions and information here that we're reading through in this chapter. It's essentially in my Bible, it's titled Israel Fully Restored. Up here we see it says the Holy District. So this is the area, of course, where the priests are to do the work for the people. So let's go ahead to the slides. Where is my Canva? Okay, here we go. Alrighty. So the sacred district. This is the first section here, which is like verses 1 through 6. So this is describing the full sacred area that would cover an area 7 miles wide and 7 miles long. One section stretching 7 miles long and 3 miles wide would be for the priests and would be for the most holy place. Another section stretching 7 miles long and 3 miles wide would be for the Levites, who serve on behalf of the people of Israel in the temple. They would no longer have towns scattered among them, among the tribes, as it was in Joshua 21, but would live with all of the rest of Israel, focused upon the center, the temple, as the presence of the Adon in the midst of his people. And the city would take up a section about 1 mile wide and 7 miles long for the whole of Israel. So we see here just like a little depiction here of what that would look like. Obviously, the seas and stuff like that, we're not really sure if that's what it is, how it's going to be. And I see the tribes divided. I would say maybe I don't know if this is north and south, but this is not accurate either. I just wanted to show, a little bit of as far as like the squares and how how that would look. All right, so let's read some connections with this first portion here. I'm going to jump back and forth through the sections. Shouldn't be too long tonight because I don't have, a crazy amount, but still enough connections where we pack a punch. So starting for verses 1 through 6, as I mentioned, we have Joshua 14:2, and it says, their inheritance was by lot, as the Adon had commanded by the hand of Moses for the 9 tribes and the half tribe. So obviously this was the first allotment that took place, and then we had a second allotment, which I believe is what's being referenced in Joshua 21. So all of the tribes had their specific portion. And as we know, the Levites did not get a portion. They would just dwell among each of the tribes. Ezekiel 44:28, this is from the last study. It says, it shall be in regard to their inheritance that I am their inheritance. You shall give them no possession in Israel, for I am their possession. And this is in reference, once again, to the Levites. 1 Chronicles 9:26 through 33. For in this trusted office were 4 chief gatekeepers. They were Levites, gatekeepers also known as watchmen or Nazarene. And they had charge over the chambers and treasuries of the house of the Elohim. And they lodged all around the house of the Elohim because they had the responsibility, and they were in charge of opening it every morning. Now, some of them were in charge of the serving vessels, for they brought them in and took them out by count. Some of them were appointed over the furnishings and over all the implements of the sanctuary and over the fine flour and the wine and the oil and the incense and the spices. And some of the sons of the priests made the ointment of the spices. Mattathiah of the Levites, the firstborn of Shallum the Korahite, had the trusted office over the things that were baked in the pans. And some of their brethren of the sons of the Kohathites were in charge of preparing the showbread for every Sabbath. These are the singers, heads of the fathers' houses of the Levites, who lodged in the chambers and were free from their duties, for they were employed in that work day and night. So this is just once again outlining the assignments of the Levites during the times of the kings, which would be a foreshadowing of what they will be doing, what will be taking place in the millennial reign. We just read as a congregation chapter 7 of Nehemiah, and I couldn't help but include this particular portion because it stood out so much to me. And I'll tell you why. Then it was when the wall was built that I had hung the doors when the gatekeepers, once again, the watchmen, the singers, the worshipers, and the Levites had been appointed, that I gave the charge of Jerusalem to my brother Hanani and Hananiah, the leader of the citadel, for he was a faithful man and feared the Elohim more than many. And I said to them, do not let the gates of Jerusalem be opened until the sun is hot. And while they stand guard, let them shut and bar the doors, and appoint guards from among the inhabitants of Jerusalem, one at his watch station and another in front of his own house. So again, why did I include this? Because we see that of the Levites, we can see that there was, I guess you could say, like a hierarchy or a rank or a level of consecration. Those who feared the Most High higher than others, who were willing to do whatever it took to serve him. But we had the appointment of those gatekeepers, those singers who were also worshipers, and then of course the Levites who had been appointed to do the works for protecting the area as well. Okay, so that's just a little sidebar there. Genesis 49:5 through 7. Simeon and Levi are brothers. Instruments of cruelty are in their dwelling place. Let not my soul enter their council. Let not my honor be united to their assembly. For in their anger they slew a man, and in their self-will they hamstrung an ox. Cursed be their anger, for it is fierce, and their wrath, for it is cruel. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. Why did I include this portion? So in this chapter 49, this is the story of one of the daughters of Jacob, Dinah, or maybe his only daughter, the only one that's mentioned, at least. And Dinah is very beautiful, and she's raped by, I think it was Hamor. I forget the man's name right now. It was crazy. It's funny because I actually read it with my son during Shabbat this week. I think I have it bookmarked here. Let me see. It's actually in chapter 34. Oh, right here. I'm sorry. I have it referenced. Let me actually read it. So I included this because in reading it, it made me kind of wonder, is this the reason why the Levites, or could be maybe a part of the reason why the Levites never had their own land to settle in. So let's just read. Genesis 34:25 through 31. Now it came to pass on the third day when they were in pain, the two sons of Jacob, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brothers, each took his sword and came boldly upon the city and killed all the males. And they killed Hamor and Shechem his son. So Dinah was raped by Shechem, and he told his father Hamor that he wanted Dinah to be his wife. So Hamor goes to Jacob and tells him, let's intermarry, let's have our daughters marry our sons, each other's sons, and we'll be able to share lands and all of these things. They were making he was trying to make a treaty or an agreement with him. And Simeon and Levi tell them, well, you're not going to be able to marry our sister unless all the men in your land get circumcised. So after the circumcision takes place, this is where we are. So the sons of Jacob came upon the slain and plundered their city because their sister had been defiled. They took their sheep, their oxen, and their donkeys, what was in the city and what was in the field, and all their wealth. All their little ones and their wives they took captive, and they plundered even all that was in the houses. Then Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, you have troubled me by making me obnoxious among the inhabitants of the land, among the Canaanites and the Perizzites. And since I am few in number, they will gather themselves together against me and kill me. I shall be destroyed, my household and I. But they said, should he treat our sister like a harlot? So the story goes on to say how they were able to get out of the land, and the Most High placed like um he put like a fear, like a terror, like a spirit of terror over the land, and they were able to get out without being attacked. So again, not sure if this is really the reason why or not, but it's in the scriptures and it kind of makes sense. um in any case, the priests still did come from the line of Levi, so just interesting how the story unfolds. All right, so now let's read some of the connections that I mentioned earlier with Melchizedek. So we have Psalm 110, verse 4, that says, the Adon has sworn and will not relent. You are a priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek. I'm going to go over now to Jasher. This is the book of Jasher, and we have chapter 16 here. I'm just going to read verses 11 and 12. So Adonizedek, that's the same as Melchizedek. Adonai and Melchi, I guess, means prince. So Adonizedek, king of Jerusalem, the same was Shem. So I brought this in to specify that Shem is who we are speaking of. Went out with his men to meet Abram and his people with bread and wine, and they remained together in the valley of Melech. And Adonizedek blessed Abram, and Abram gave him a tenth from all that he had brought from the spoil of his enemies. For Adonizedek was a priest before the Elohim. And if you've read through the scriptures, you know that Shem had what was called the house of prophets, and many of the sons of Noah, the grandsons, great grandsons, etc., would go to the house of prophets and learn about the law there. And that's how they were able to carry out the law without it actually having been in written form until the time of Moses. So just an interesting connection or piece there as well. We did read Hebrews 7, 1 through 3 already. And now we go into, once again, Well, actually, I'm sorry. I started reading this and this is for verses 7 through 8. So let me go back to the slides really quick. I got a little excited with that portion. Okay. So the princes of Israel. What is the importance of fair measure? So we're seeing also that there's a reference to the specific measurements for the offerings that they would be given. And we're going to read these connections as well for verses 9 through 12. And basically, 1 shekel, as we're going to read, 1 shekel would be approximately 4 ounces and therefore 1 mina, about 24 ounces. The ephah for dry measurements and the bath for liquid measurements would be 5.8 gallons. And so the homer would be about 58 gallons total. So it was like a large amount that they were offering. And then no longer would the princes be allowed to abuse Israel as had occurred throughout Israel's history, but would receive a portion of the land surrounding the sides of the sacred districts. I thought I had another section here for verses 7 through 8, but it's okay. So let's continue with the connections here. So I'm just going to read through the connections for verses 7 all the way through verse 12. Yeah, through verse 12. So for verses 7 and 8, we have what I mentioned, the book of Jasher precept, the Psalm 110 and 4, Hebrews 7, 1 through 3. Then we also have Luke 1, 32 through 33, which says, he will be great and will be called the Son of the Highest. And the Adon Elohim will give him the throne of his father David, and he will reign over the house of Jacob forever, and of his kingdom there will be no end. So again, that's why we see the confirmation that yes, this is also Messiah who is being spoken of as the prince. Psalm 2, 8 through 9 says, ask of me, and I will give you the nations for your inheritance, and the ends of the earth for your possession. You shall break them with a rod of iron. You shall dash them to pieces like a potter's vessel. Ezekiel 34, 24. And I, the Adon, will be their Elohim, and my servant David, a prince among them. I, the Adon, have spoken. Isaiah 9, 5 through 6. For every warrior's sandal from the noisy battle and garments rolled in blood will be used for burning and fuel of fire. For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government will be upon his shoulder. And his name will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty Elohim, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace, or Salam, Prince of Shalom. So we see here that he would have the government upon his shoulder. And we know that obviously the descendants of a man is of the line of his father, right? And Messiah's adopted father, if you will, is Joseph, who was of the line of Judah. However, his mother, Mary, was of the line of the Levites. So there's always that beautiful connection that we see that he was both of the line of Judah and also of the line of the priests, making him a prince that was also a high priest. The connections there is just unmistakable, right? Also, we have Jeremiah 23, verse 5, that says, behold, the days are coming, says the Adon, that I will raise to David a branch of righteousness. A king shall reign and prosper and execute judgment and righteousness in the earth. Once again, speaking of Messiah. Anytime we see David, we're able to identify that it's Messiah himself who is being spoken of. Just a few more for verses 7 through 8. So we have first Isaiah 11, 3 through 5. It says, his delight is in the fear of the Adon, and he shall not judge by the sight of his eyes, nor decide by the hearing of his ears. But with righteousness he shall judge the poor, and decide with equity for the meek of the earth. He shall strike the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips he shall slay the wicked. Righteousness shall be the belt of his loins, and faithfulness the belt of his waist. All the attributes of our beautiful Messiah. And it sounds even like the armor of the Most High. So he carried that, he wore it, and exemplified it. Isaiah 60, 17 through 18. Instead of bronze, I will bring gold. Instead of iron, I will bring silver. Instead of wood, bronze, and instead of stones, iron. I will also make your officers peace and your magistrates righteousness. Violence shall no longer be heard in your land, neither wasting nor destruction within your borders. But you shall call your walls salvation and your gates praise. This actually ties in better with verse 9, which is speaking of how the princes would no longer plunder, they would remove the violence and no longer execute justice and righteousness and stop dispossessing the people. Well, also verse 8 too, because the princes would no longer oppress his people. So both tie in well together. And then lastly, for that portion, we have Revelation 19, 11 through 16, which says, Now I saw heaven open, and behold, a white horse. And he who sat on him was called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he judges and makes war. His eyes were like a flame of fire, and on his head were many crowns. He had a name written that no one knew except himself. He was clothed with a robe dipped in blood, and his name is called the Word of the Elohim. And the armies in heaven, clothed in fine linen, white and clean, followed him on white horses. Now out of his mouth goes a sharp sword, that with it he should strike the nations. And he himself will rule them with a rod of iron. He himself treads the winepress of the fierceness and wrath of the Almighty Elohim. And he has on his robe and on his thigh a name written, King of Kings and Elohim of Elohims. So once again, just another confirmation of our Messiah being that prince that sits and judges and executes righteousness and makes war and all the scary things that we'll be experiencing, because I know for sure I'm gonna be in like all terror, excitement, all the feels when that day comes. And may we be found worthy, right? And and puro plop, yes, exactly. Falling on our face with our bowels coming out of us. Just crazy feelings. All right, so verses 9 through 12 now. We have Moco Libre. Zechariah 8:16. These are the things you shall do. Speak each man the truth to his neighbor. Give judgment in your gates for truth, justice, and peace. So obviously, Zechariah here is also speaking about those princes no longer oppressing the people. And then Jeremiah 22:3, thus says the Adon, execute judgment and righteousness and deliver the plundered out of the hand of the oppressor. Do no wrong and do no violence to the stranger, the fatherless, or the widow, nor shed innocent blood in this place. So of course, here it's speaking of the sojourner, the fatherless, the widow, the orphan, the widow. But this is Jeremiah was speaking, but then of course we're seeing how Ezekiel is speaking about how it would no longer be to any of his people altogether. Psalm 82, 2 through 5. How long will you judge unjustly and show partiality to the wicked? Selah. Defend the poor and fatherless. Do justice to the afflicted and needy. Deliver the poor and needy. Free them from the hand of the wicked. They do not know, nor do they understand. They walk about in darkness. All the foundations of the earth are unstable. So as long as those princes continue to execute judgment in the way that they are doing, instability will remain. Micah 2, 1 through 12. Woe to those who devise iniquity and work out evil on their beds. At morning light, they practice it because it is in the power of their hand. They covet fields and take them by violence, also houses, and seize them. So they oppress a man and his house, a man and his inheritance. This I remember vividly from our study of the book of Isaiah, just because it tied in so well with modern day and what we see with the government, what we see with world leaders, how they, take advantage of people essentially. And that's what we're living out here. What was being spoken of back then, we're living it out now, and it will come to an end. And that's the hope that we have. Then we have Leviticus 19:35 and 36, and it says, "You shall do no injustice in judgment, in measurement of height, weight, or volume. You shall have honest scales, honest weights, an honest ephah, and an honest hin. I am the Adon Elohim who brought you out of the land of Egypt." So this is connecting, of course, to now the measurements of he's quoting basically right here in verse 10, he's quoting Leviticus. Same exact thing, word for word there. We have also Hosea 12:7, and it says, "A cunning Canaanite, deceitful scales are in his hand. He loves to oppress." So anyone who is deceitful can be likened to a Canaanite, which, as we know, was not an Israelite, not whether bloodborn or adopted, right? Not someone who was in covenant with the Father. Amos 8:5 through 6, saying, "When will the new moon be passed that we may sell grain, and the Sabbath that we may trade, making the ephah small and the shekel large, falsifying the scales by deceit, that we may buy the poor for silver and the needy for a pair of sandals, even sell the bad wheat?" So this is obviously also in connection to doing things in order and in integrity. Proverbs 11:1, dishonest scales are an abomination to the Adon, but a just weight is his delight. So again, deceiving others and taking from them, it's the wrong thing to do. Proverbs 16:11, honest weights and scales are the Adon's, all the weight in the bags are his work. Proverbs 21:3, to do righteousness and justice is more acceptable to the Adon than sacrifice. I love the book of Proverbs. It has pretty much everything that we need to read in order for us to live a life of integrity and righteousness before our Father. I love how it begins too, because it says, listen to the advice, take heed to the advice of your mother and your father. Obviously, I believe it's very spiritual. It's not speaking, or it could also be speaking of our physical mothers and fathers, if they are those who are training us up in the way that we should go when we're children. Deuteronomy 25:15, you shall have a perfect and just weight, a perfect and just measure, that your days may be lengthened in the land which the Adon your Elohim is giving you. So again, this is another second or third witness to what's being said here in verse 10. And then lastly, we have Micah 6:10 through 11, and it says, "Are there yet the treasures of the wickedness in the house of the wicked, and the short measure that is an abomination? Shall I count pure those with the wicked scales and with the bag of deceitful weights?" So again, just speaking in the same line about doing things in a just manner when it comes to those offerings that were being given. Makes me think of Cain and Abel. And also, who were the ones that fell dead in the temple in the New Testament, that they gave the wrong offering or an incomplete offering? I forget. It was a couple that fell dead. All right, so let's go now back to the Canva here. Yes, Ananias and Sapphira. Thank you. I don't know why my Canva is not showing up, and I have to like go to it and then share it. So weird. Can you guys see the Canva? Okay, awesome. All right, so now verses 13 through 17. Now we're speaking about the offerings for atonement. So just a few questions posed here, also tying into what we spoke about with Melchizedek. So why would the Adon be so specific about the offerings Israel was to offer? The offerings made of wheat and barley were nearly 2% of the total amount that was in the land, the oil 1%, and the sheep 0.5%. These sacrifices were specifically for atonement. What need would Israel have for atonement at that time, by then? Also note that the prince plays a particular role in making provision for the sacrifices as well. There was to be an atonement made on the first day of the year and the seventh. Were these to be repeated for atonement of the temple? These are, again, just a bunch of questions that, as you read through, it makes you wonder. Why would the temple need atonement? Why would there have to be blood spilled? What sorts of sins were said to be covered by this sacrifice? And again, is Ezekiel describing Passover, Day of Atonement, Sukkot? I'm thinking the 8th day, or is it something else? So, and then we also see in verses 21 and 22 that it's specifically speaking about Passover. And then we also see as it goes on that in verse, I think it's 25, it's speaking about Sukkot. So there has to be a reason for that as well. No coincidences with Abba ever. So now some connections here for verses 13 through 17. We first have Leviticus 1:4, and it says, Then he shall put his hands on the head of the burnt offering, and it will be accepted on his behalf to make atonement for him. This is speaking of the priests, right? Before they make atonement for others, they had to atone for their own sins. Leviticus 6:30, but no sin offering from which any of the blood is brought into the tabernacle of meeting to make atonement in the holy place shall be eaten. It shall be burned with fire. So just more instructions on what would be taking place. Then Hebrews 9:22 through 23. And according to the law, almost all things are purified with blood, and without shedding of blood, there is no remission. Therefore, it was necessary that the copies of the things in the heavens should be purified with these, but the heavenly things themselves with better sacrifices than these. So we see in order for things to happen in the spirit, there had to be a physical manifestation here on earth. Hebrews 2:17 also states, Therefore, in all things he had to be made like his brethren, that he might be a merciful and faithful high priest in things pertaining to the Elohim, to make propitiation for the sins of the people. And again, this is speaking of our Messiah. He became the propitiation for the sins. He was that shedding of blood that is now being presented to do. We see it here. I think it was, let's see. Where was it that it said to spill the blood and over the, well, anyway, there was a portion here that speaks about the blood being spilled over the altar. I might have skipped it already. All right, continuing Exodus 30:14 and 15. Everyone included among those who are numbered from 20 years old and above shall give an offering to the Adon. The rich shall not give more, and the poor shall not give less than half a shekel, when you give an offering to the Adon to make atonement for yourselves. So again, offerings, this is just connecting to the fact that offerings were given for atonement of sin, and normally in the form of animals. Jeremiah 38:9. For it shall come to pass in that day, says the Adon of hosts, that I will break his yoke from your neck and will burst your bonds. Foreigners shall no more enslave them, but they shall serve the Elohim, the Adon their Elohim, and David their king, whom I will raise up for them. Hosea 3:5. Afterward, the children of Israel shall return and seek the Adon their Elohim and David their king. They shall fear the Adon and his goodness in the latter days. So again, like I said, this is just making more connections about the offerings that would be given. It also made me think of the pilgrimage feasts, which are the three feasts that they are to gather together and give an offering, which is Passover, unleavened bread, Shavuot, and the Feast of Tabernacles. Those are the three pilgrimage feasts where all of the land would gather together to worship the Adon. Isaiah 66:23. And it shall come to pass that from one new moon to another, and from one Sabbath to another, all flesh shall come to worship before me. So it seems also that as in the end, our Messiah will be worshipped on a weekly basis, from one new moon to another, and from one Sabbath to another. Hebrews 9:23, therefore it was necessary that the copies of the things in the heavens should be purified with these, but the heavenly things themselves with better sacrifices than these. And I think I read this portion already, but repetition is good for us to let it sink in and take in the understanding of what is being said here. Leviticus 16:16. So now we're actually in verses 18 through 20 about keeping the feasts, okay? So Leviticus 16:16 and then verses 18 through 20. So he shall make atonement for the holy place because of the uncleanness of the children of Israel and because of their transgressions, for all their sins. And so he shall do for the tabernacle of meeting, which remains among them in the midst of their uncleanness. And he shall go out to the altar that is before the Adon and make atonement for it, and shall take some of the blood of the bull and some of the blood of the goat, and put it on the horns of the altar all around. Then he shall sprinkle some of the blood on it, and with his finger 7 times cleanse it and consecrate it from the uncleanness of the children of Israel. And when he has made an end of atoning for the holy place, the tabernacle of meeting, and the altar, he shall bring the live goat. So we see here, this is what the high priest was instructed to do in order to atone, and how he had to cleanse the altar before he made atonement of sins for the people as well. And then we have Hebrews 10. I'm actually going to read 3 through 4 first, and then 19 through 22. So verses 3 through 4 says, but in those sacrifices there is a reminder of sins every year, for it is not possible that the blood of bulls and goats could take away sin. So here, this actually shines light on why there would be sacrifices in the millennial reign or in New Jerusalem, because essentially it's being done as a remembrance, not necessarily for the atonement of sins, but rather in order for there to be a reflection or a remembrance on what we have come out of. Quite possibly that's what it is. Hebrews 10:19 through 22. Therefore, brethren, having boldness to enter the holiest by the blood of Messiah, by a new and living way which he consecrated for us through the veil that is his flesh, and having a high priest over the house of the Elohim, let us draw near with a true heart in full assurance of faith, having our hearts sprinkled from an evil conscience and our bodies washed with pure water. So this is possible for anyone who desires to enter into covenant with the Father. They can be washed, renewed, consecrated, sanctified, and purified in order to be able to finally worship him in spirit and in truth. And it's beautiful because, as we know, the angels rejoice over the salvation of one. So how much more if that one person dives in and is like, I want to give my life entirely to the Most High. It's beautiful. Numbers 28:11 through 15 says, at the beginning of your months, you shall present a burnt offering to the Adon, 2 young bulls, 1 ram, and 7 lambs in the first year without blemish, 3/10 of an ephah of fine flour as a grain offering mixed with oil for each bull, 2/10 of an ephah of fine flour as a grain offering mixed with oil for the 1 ram, and 1/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with oil as a grain offering for each lamb, as a burnt offering of sweet aroma, an offering made by fire to the Adon. Their drink offering shall be a half a hin of wine for a bull, 1/3 of a hin for a ram, and 1/4 of a hin for a lamb. This is the burnt offering for each month throughout the months of the year. Also, 1 kid of the goats as a sin offering to the Adon shall be offered, besides the regular burnt offering and its drink offering. I don't know why this is silly, but I thought about like breaded meat with the flour, the grain, but I know that's also like unleavened cakes, really, if you think about how it's being mixed, that offering that was being given. Exodus 12:2 says, "This month shall be your beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you." So here again, so connecting again up here with Numbers 28, we see now that the Israelites were originally instructed to give an offering at the beginning of each month. And we see obviously the marking of the beginning of months, and the first month of the year to us is the beginning of spring. The first full moon after the spring equinox. Hebrews 5:2, he can have compassion on those who are ignorant and going astray, since he himself is also subject to weakness. Because of the fact that our Messiah became in the flesh, he became subject to weakness. And although he was stronger than that, he was able to overcome and not give in. It also produced that compassion over those who were ignorant and going astray, those who have not come to the knowledge of the truth entirely yet, um, don't have the understanding. As we spoke about this the last study too, that there are going to be those people who are presented certain information, and because of cognitive dissonance, the predictive programming and everything that they have experienced in their lives, it's difficult to visualize yourself as Israel and as a royal priesthood and have that mindset that would lead you to fully dive into Torah and give your life entirely over to him. Now, of course, there are still people who have given their lives entirely over to him, who may not necessarily be keeping Torah, but are keeping the laws without acknowledging that they're doing so. So yeah, if anything, the study has also taught us that, to show a little bit more compassion to those around us, that everybody is on a journey, everybody is being processed, and it's always a heart matter at the end of the day. Hebrews 5:2 says, oh, well, actually, I did read this already. So now let me go back to the slides. Okay, so let's keeps pausing. Hold on. I don't know why my Canva is so weird today. All right. So the feasts. The requirements here are notably different than those found in Torah concerning the Passover celebration, and we're going to look at some of these scriptures as well. And we see here this is just like a depiction of the pilgrimage feast, how everyone will be heading to New Jerusalem into the gates to worship him during those feasts. So, and however, it is also notable that whereas there was never a repetition of the smearing of blood on the doorposts after the exodus from Egypt, yet in verses 19 and 20, the posts of the temple were to be smeared in sacrificial blood prior to the actual celebration of Passover that would begin a week later. So we see that it was on day 7, the 7th day of the first month was when they would smear the blood on the temple. The other feast day is unnamed, but it is said to occur at the time of Feast of Tabernacles on the 15th day of the 7th month. And we'll see that now as well. Let's go back. All right, so first off, Leviticus 23, 5 through 8. Leviticus 23 is a chapter that outlines all of the appointed times. I think 23 and 24, if I'm not mistaken. And then Numbers 28 and 29 as well. On the 14th day of the first month at twilight is the Adon's Passover, and on the 15th day of the same month is the feast of unleavened bread to the Adon. 7 days you must eat unleavened bread. On the first day you shall have a holy convocation. You shall do no customary work on it, but you shall offer an offering made by fire to the Adon for 7 days. The 7th day shall be a holy convocation. You shall do no customary work on it. So here it's saying an offering made by fire. So let's go back to 19 and 20. Well, first off, the first month on the first day of the month, you shall take a young bull without blemish and cleanse the sanctuary. On the 7th day of the month, for everyone who has sinned unintentionally or in ignorance, thus you shall make atonement for the temple by taking some of the blood of the sin offering and putting it on the doorposts of the temple, the four corners of the ledge of the altar, and on the gateposts of the gate of the inner court. Very interesting here. On the 7 days of the feast, he shall prepare a burnt offering to the Adon. So we have the offering by fire is being listed here, but then we also have the 7 bulls and 7 rams without blemish daily for 7 days, and then a kid of goats daily for a sin offering. So a little bit more will be done than what was customary for the Passover. Then now we have First Corinthians. Just trying to find my place really quick. Okay. 1 Corinthians 5, 7 through 8. And it says, therefore, purge out the old leaven, that you may be a new lump, since you truly are unleavened. For indeed Christ, our Passover, was sacrificed for us. Therefore, let us keep the feast, not with old leaven, nor with the leaven of malice and wickedness, but with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. And as we approach the Passover season, which is literally almost, I believe, 4 weeks away, if I'm not mistaken, maybe a little bit more. This is a time of introspection. And in the week of the Passover, obviously removing all of the leaven, the physical and the spiritual leaven from our homes to make sure that we're keeping the feast according to what was instructed. Again, we have the second witness in Deuteronomy, and then in Numbers 28. So 16, 1 through 8 says, observe the month of Abib and keep the Passover to the Adon your Elohim. For in the month of Abib, the Adon your Elohim brought you out of Egypt by night. Therefore, you shall sacrifice the Passover to the Adon your Elohim from the flock and the herd in the place where the Adon chooses to put his name. You shall eat no leavened bread with it. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread with it, that is, the bread of affliction. For you came out of the land of Egypt in haste, that you may remember the day in which you came out of the land of Egypt all the days of your life. And no leaven shall be seen among you in all your territory for 7 days, nor shall any of the meat which you sacrifice the first day at twilight remain overnight until morning. You may not sacrifice the Passover within any of your gates which the Adon your Elohim gives you, but at the place where the Adon your Elohim chooses to make his name abide. There you shall sacrifice the Passover at twilight, at the going down of the sun, at the time you came out of Egypt. And you shall roast and eat it in the days which the Adon your Elohim chooses, and in the morning you shall turn and go to your tents. 6 days you shall eat unleavened bread, and on the 7th day there shall be a sacred assembly to the Adon your Elohim. You shall do no work on it. So this is just a review, and then we have, you can write this down. I'm not going to read through it because it's the same thing. Numbers 28, 16 through 25. And then we also have additional instructions here for Passover as well. Numbers 9, 2 through 14. I'm just making sure here. Yeah, it's Passover. And then also another reference, I'm not going to read through because it's very long. We have Exodus 12, 1 through 28. And this is, after the Israelites were able to get out, that he gave the instructions on how they should conduct themselves moving forward and how they should observe the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And then we have Matthew 26, 26 through 28. And as they were eating, Messiah took bread, blessed and broke it, and gave it to the disciples and said, take, eat, this is my body. Then he took the cup and gave thanks and gave it to them, saying, "Drink from it, all of you, for this is my blood of the new covenant, which is shed for many for the remission of sins." And the interesting part, of course, if you haven't noticed, is that he took the cup, gave thanks, and handed it over to them. He didn't drink from it himself. Matthew 20:28, just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life and ransom for many, which is what we are all called to do. 2 Corinthians 5:21, for he made him who knew no sin to be sin for us, that we might become the righteousness of the Elohim in him. Amen. So I feel like these two kind of tie together. That just as he came to serve, so are we, so that we would become the righteousness of the Elohim. Hebrews 10:8-12, previously saying, sacrifice and offering, burnt offerings, and offerings for sin you did not desire, nor had pleasure in them, which are offered according to the law. Then he said, behold, I have come to do your will, O Elohim. He takes away the first that he may establish the second, the physical to the spiritual. By that will we have been sanctified through the offering of the body of Yashaya HaMashiach once for all. And every priest stands ministering daily and offering repeatedly the same sacrifices which can never take away sins. But this man, Messiah, after he had offered one sacrifice for sins forever, sat down at the right hand of the Elohim. Amen. Amen. Okay, and then this is also in regards to the offerings that would be given. I'll go ahead and read it. It says 3/10 of an ephah of fine flour as a grain offering mixed with oil for each bull. 2/10 of an ephah of fine flour as a grain offering mixed with oil for the one ram. And 1/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with oil as a grain offering for each lamb as a burnt offering of sweet aroma, an offering made by fire to the Adon. Their drink offering shall be half a hin of wine for a bull, 1/3 of a hin for a ram, and 1/4 of a hin for a lamb. This is the burnt offering for which each month throughout the months of the year. Also, 1 kid of the goats as a sin offering to the Adon shall be offered, besides the regular burnt offering and its drink offering. So we see it once again all throughout the scriptures, all throughout the Torah, what the instructions were for the Levitical sacrificial system, which Hebrews shows us was done away with when Messiah came. Here, Numbers 29:12-38, we have a review of the Feast of Tabernacles and the specific offerings that were to be given here as well. Okay. And if you read through it, you'll see that the number of bulls and rams and all of those different animals, they don't align. It's not the same amount as in Ezekiel or the New Jerusalem. Leviticus 23:33 through 34. I'm sorry, through 43. Again is a second witness or first witness, and then Numbers would be the second witness of the Feast of Tabernacles. So you could just write that down. And then we have John 7:37-39, and it says, on the last day, the great day, the eighth day, or the millennial reign, Messiah stood and cried out, saying, if anyone thirsts, let him come to me and drink. He who believes in me, as the scripture has said, out of his heart will flow rivers of living water. But this he spoke concerning the Spirit, whom those believing in him would receive. For the Holy Spirit was not yet given, because Yasha was not yet glorified. So we just see here a foreshadowing of the millennial reign, which at that point we would all have the Ruach. That would be the way that we would be marked for him to know who his people are, who his sheep truly are. First Chronicles 5:3 says, therefore all the men of Israel assembled with the king at the feast, which was in the 7th month. Just a little confirmation there of the timing. Nehemiah 8:14-18. And they found, and this one always makes me get in my feelings, because as we've spoken of before, and Liz has said it many times, we are literally living in the times of Nehemiah now, and it's beautiful to witness the continuous awakening of the different scattered tribes, scattered nations who have this hunger to really discover the written law and honor it. So I'll read it. Nehemiah 8:14-18. And they found written in the law which the Adon had commanded by Moses that the children of Israel should dwell in booths during the feast of the 7th month, and that they should announce and proclaim in all their cities and in Jerusalem, saying, go out to the mountain and bring olive branches, branches of olive trees, branches of oil trees, myrtle branches, palm branches, and branches of leafy trees to make booths as it is written. Then the people went out and brought them and made themselves booths, each one on the roof of his house, or in their courtyards, or the courts of the house of the Elohim, and in the open square of the water gate, and in the open square of the gate of Ephraim. So the whole assembly of those who had returned from the captivity made booths and sat under the booths. For since the days of Joshua the son of Nun, until that day the children of Israel had not done so. And there was very great gladness. Also day by day, from the first day until the last day, he read from the book of the law of the Elohim, and they kept the feast 7 days. And on the 8th day, there was a sacred assembly according to the prescribed manner. It's going to be so beautiful when we are all able to gather together and worship him at the mountains, or at the mountain. I'm sorry, I need to cough really quick. Okay. So continuing, now we see in 2 Chronicles 7:8-10. This is King Solomon. So at that time, Solomon kept the feast 7 days, and all Israel with him, a very great assembly, from the entrance of Hamath to the brook of Egypt. And on the 8th day, they held a sacred assembly, for they observed the dedication of the altar 7 days, and the feast 7 days. On the 23rd day of the 7th month, he sent the people away to their tents, joyful and glad of heart, for the good that the Adon had done for David, for Solomon, and for his people, Yasharallah. It's been done all throughout time. Okay, and then I think that's it. Yes, that concludes chapter 45. Let me make sure I don't have any. Yeah, I think this is the next that I have is for the next slide I have is for 46. So let's go back to the reading now. How do I go back? Sorry, guys, I'm like stuck here in. Okay, there we go. All right, Liz, let me go to 46. And you can go ahead and read through the entire chapter, Liz.
Okay. Thus says the Adon, the gateway of the inner court that faces toward the east shall be shut the 6 working days, but on the Sabbath it shall be opened, and on the day of the new moon it shall be opened. The prince shall enter by way of the vestibule of the gateway from the outside, and stand by the gate post. The priest shall prepare his burnt offering and his peace offerings. He shall worship at the threshold of the gate. Then he shall go out, but the gate shall not be shut until evening. Likewise, the people of the land shall worship at the entrance to this gateway before the Adon on the Sabbaths and the new moons. The burnt offering that the prince offers to the Adon on the Sabbath day shall be 6 lambs without blemish, and a ram without blemish. And the grain offering shall be 1 ephah for a ram, and the grain offering for the lambs as much as he wants to give, as well as a hin of oil with every ephah. On the day of the new moon it shall be a young bull without blemish, 6 lambs and a ram, they shall be without blemish. He shall prepare a grain offering of an ephah for a bull, an ephah for a ram, as much as he wants to give for the lambs, and a hin of oil with every ephah. When the prince enters, he shall go in by way of the vestibule of the gateway and go out the same way. But when the people of the land come before the Adon on the appointed feast days, whoever enters by way of the north gate to worship shall go out by way of the south gate, and whoever enters by way of the south gate shall go out by way of the north gate. He shall not return by way of the gate through which he came, but shall go out through the opposite gate. The prince shall then be in their midst. When they go in, he shall go in, and when they go out, he shall go out. At the festivals and the appointed feast days, the grain offering shall be an ephah for a bull, an ephah for a ram, as much as he wants to give for the lambs, and a hin of oil with every ephah. Now, when the prince makes a voluntary burnt offering or voluntary peace offering to the Adon, the gate that faces toward the east shall then be opened for him, and he shall prepare his burnt offering and his peace offerings as he did on the Sabbath day. Then he shall go out, and after he goes out, the gate shall be shut. You shall daily make a burnt offering to the Adon of a lamb of the first year without blemish. You shall prepare it every morning, and you shall prepare a grain offering with it every morning, a sixth of an ephah, and a third of a hin of oil to moisten the fine flour. This grain offering is a perpetual ordinance to be made regularly to the Adon. Thus they shall prepare the lamb, the grain offering, and the oil as a regular burnt offering every morning. Thus says the Adon Elohim, if the prince gives a gift of some of his inheritance to any of his sons, it shall belong to his sons. It is their possession by inheritance. But if he gives a gift of some of his inheritance to one of his servants, it shall be his until the year of liberty, after which it shall return to the prince. But his inheritance shall belong to his sons. It shall become theirs. Moreover, the prince shall not take any of the people's inheritance by evicting them from their property. He shall provide an inheritance for his sons from his own property, so that none of my people may be scattered from his property. Now he brought me through the entrance, which was at this side of the gate, into the holy chambers of the priests, which faced toward the north, and there a place was situated at their extreme western end. And he said to me, this is the place where the priests shall boil the trespass offering and the sin offering, and where they shall bake the grain offering, so that they do not bring them out into the outer court to sanctify the people. Then he brought me out into the outer court and caused me to pass by the 4 corners of the court. And in fact, in every corner of the court there was another court. In the 4 corners of the court were enclosed courts, 40 cubits long and 30 wide. All 4 corners were the same size. There was a row of building stones all around in them, all around the 4 of them, and cooking hearths were made under the rows of stones all around. And he said to me, these are the kitchens where the ministers of the temple shall boil the sacrifices of the people.
Thank you. Okay. So now we're gonna talk about the once again, we're still obviously with what the priests their assignment was, the prince and the entry. And we've seen this several times throughout these chapters that the prince would enter in and exit out of where he came, while the people would enter in. If they came in through the south, they had to exit through the north. If they came in through the north, they had to exit through the south. So the Sabbath and the new moons is the first portion of this chapter. The eastern outer court gate was perpetually kept shut, but the inner court's eastern gate was opened every Sabbath and new moon when the prince was to come and offer sacrifices and stand at the entrance of the gate giving worship to the Adon. The people were also to worship the Adon at the gate. The prince must come and go at the same gateway, but the people were to leave at the opposite if they entered the north, like I said, and vice versa. What is the point of the control at the gates? The prince was to act as just another person and would not stay longer than the rest of the people, though he was the only one permitted use of the eastern inner court gate, which would be shut at evening after he had gone. There was a marked difference between what Ezekiel was instructed and what had happened throughout Israel's history in regard to the ruler's relations to the temple. So, oh my gosh, am I not showing? So sorry, you guys. I didn't even realize that the Canva wasn't showing. Sorry about that. So this is what I was trying to No, I'm sorry. This is what I was trying to show. Just more visuals as we see the outer court or the outer gates and then the inner gateway that would be opened on the Sabbath. And then here we see the east as well, where interestingly enough, on the east side was the camp of Judah, while on the west was the camp of Ephraim. So I find that pretty interesting. And then we know that from the east was the direct entry into the Holy of Holies. And they were also commanded to make daily offerings. So more questions posed here. Why might the language have shifted from the third person to the second person, as in you, which we'll see in the verse, for this portion of the verses? Was Ezekiel also expected to participate in this, or was this being directed to the audience who was reading? Also, how does the nature of the sacrifices being a lasting ordinance relate to what is written in Hebrews 7:27 and 9:25 through 10 verse 18. So we're gonna read just a snippet of this part as well. So let's go back to the reading, to the connections. All right, so starting with, we're just gonna go through, let me just make sure. I think it's verses 1 through, I want to say through 12. Anyway, let me just read through. So Psalm 81, 3 through 4. So it says, blow the trumpet at the time of the new moon, at the full moon on our solemn feast day, for this is a statute for Israel, a law of the Elohim of Jacob. So this is obviously the instruction for each new moon, for each full moon, the beginning of each month, and the offerings that would need to take place. And of course, we have Exodus 20 and 9, which is a review of the commandments. 6 days you shall labor and do all of your work. I should have extended it through to describe the Sabbath. This is basically speaking of keeping the Sabbath. And connecting that to how with the full moon, the new moon, the first day of the month is also a holy convocation day. Hebrews 4, 9 through 10 says, there remains therefore a rest for the people of the Elohim, for he who has entered his rest has himself also ceased from his works, as the Elohim did from his. Hebrews 5, 7 through 8, who in the days of his flesh, when he had offered up prayers and supplications with vehement cries and tears to him, who was able to save him from death, and was heard because of his godly fear, though he was a son, yet he learned obedience by the things which he suffered. And isn't that what happens to us too? A lot of times, we have to go through the fire, we have to go through difficulties in this life that push us to further obedience to the Father. It's always a purpose. There's always a purpose for for the refinement and for the process. And we must be grateful for it. John 10:1-3 says, most assuredly, I say to you, he who does not enter the sheepfold by the door, but climbs up some other way, the same is a thief and a robber. But he who enters by the door and is shepherd of the sheep, to him the doorkeeper opens, and the sheep hear his voice, and he calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. And I found this as a similarity, speaking of the prince entering in through the east gate and the people standing at the door to worship him. And again, we see Messiah saying that he himself is the door. If anyone enters by him, that person will be saved and will go in and out and find pasture. Numbers 28:9-10. And on the Sabbath day, 2 lambs in their first year without blemish, and 2/10 of an ephah of fine flour as a grain offering mixed with oil with its drink offering. This is the burnt offering for every Sabbath, besides the regular burnt offering with its drink offering. And then verse 12 as well, 3/10 of an ephah of fine flour as a grain offering mixed with oil for each bull. 2/10 of an ephah of fine flour as a grain offering mixed with oil for one ram. So this is we see that Numbers is being quoted here. Where is it? Right here. Verse 7 and verse 5. So these instructions were an everlasting ordinance, it seems like. Deuteronomy 16:17. Each man shall give as he is able according to the blessing of the Adon your Elohim, which he has given you. Which is beautiful because a lot of times we're pressured into giving the largest possible offering that we can give in order to buy our blessing and all of these things. But we see how considerate our Heavenly Father was in stating, do your best. And although, of course, he loves a cheerful giver, he doesn't want you to put yourself in debt in order to keep up with the masses, with everybody else who's giving large offerings. Colossians, let's see. Oh no, I'm sorry. Leviticus 14:21. And it goes further here with suggestions. But if he is poor and cannot afford it, then he shall take one male lamb as a trespass offering to be waived to make atonement for him. 1/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with oil as a grain offering, a log of oil. Where there's a will, there's a way. Colossians 1:18. And he is the head of the body, the church, who is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in all things he may have the preeminence. And again, this is speaking of our Messiah, being that prince. It's just a connection with verse 8 here. Okay, and then Deuteronomy 16:16. Now we're kind of reviewing verses 9-11. And so it says, 3 times a year all your males shall appear before the Adon your Elohim in the place which he chooses, at the feast of unleavened bread, at the feast of weeks, and at the feast of tabernacles. So what I mentioned as far as the pilgrimage feast. And they shall not appear before the Adon empty-handed. Exodus 23:14-17. 3 times you shall keep a feast to me in the year. You shall keep the feast of unleavened bread. You shall eat unleavened bread 7 days, as I commanded you at the time appointed in the month of Abib. For in it you came out of Egypt. None shall appear before me empty. And the feast of the harvest, the firstfruits of your labors which you have sown in the field. And the feast of ingathering, so Shavuot, tabernacles, at the end of the year, when you have gathered the fruit of your labors from the field. 3 times in the year, all your males shall appear before the Adon your Elohim. And then Malachi 4:4. Remember the law of Moses, my servant, which I commanded him in Horeb for all Israel with the statutes and judgments. So just reminding us that those laws were established for a reason in order for obedience to to be the marking of what we're supposed to be doing for him. Psalm 42:4. When I remember these things, I pour out my soul within me. For I used to go with the multitude. I went with them to the house of the Elohim with the voice of joy and praise, with a multitude that kept a pilgrim feast. This is us. This is what prayerfully, hopefully, we will be doing, keeping the pilgrim feast and going up to the mountain to worship the Adon in that day. Hebrews 4:14-16. Seeing then that we have a great high priest who has passed through the heavens, Yashaya HaMashiach, the son of the Elohim, let us hold fast our confession, for we do not have a high priest who cannot sympathize with our weaknesses, but was in all points tempted as we are, yet without sin. Let us therefore come boldly to the throne of grace that we may obtain mercy and find grace to help in the time of need. Matthew 28:20. Teaching them to observe all things that I have commanded you, and lo, I am with you always, even to the end of age. Amen. So this is a promise to us who are doing the things that we're supposed to do. He's with us. He's with us until the end. Hebrews 3:6, but Christ as a son over his own house, whose house we are if we hold fast the confidence and the rejoicing of the hope firm to the end. So this is us being the temple the temple of the Ruach Kodesh. Psalm 122, verses 1-4. And again, these are still for verses 9-11. Psalm of David. I was glad when they said to me, let us go into the house of the Adon. Our feet have been standing within your gates. O Jerusalem, Jerusalem is built as a city that is compact together, where the tribes go up, the tribes of the Adon, to the testimony of Israel, to give thanks to the name of the Most High. Again, very exciting what will happen. And then Nehemiah 8:9. We didn't read this portion, which is even more beautiful. It says, so they read distinctly from the book in the law of the Elohim, and they gave the sense and helped them to understand the reading. And Nehemiah, who was the governor, Ezra the priest and scribe, and the Levites who taught the people, said to all the people, this day is holy to the Adon your Elohim. Do not mourn nor weep. For all the people wept when they heard the words of the law. So we see that in the times of Nehemiah, they came to the knowledge of the truth and they wept because they realized that they had been doing it wrong all along. This is a precept that we hadn't read yet, and I did include the Hebrews one again. So this one connects with, I think we didn't read it. This one connects with that one, the section in the book of Joshua 16. And it says, then Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was the priest of the Elohim Most High. And again, we did read this. So I'm just going to read verse 27. It says, who does not need daily as those high priests to offer up sacrifices, first for his own sins and then for the people. For this he did once and for all when he offered himself up. So, of course, we see that the prince, Melchizedek, would be the one doing the offerings. And in Hebrews, it goes on to speak about Messiah, who became that sacrifice for us. So again, we see the distinctions here. All right, let me see. All right, so I'm gonna go. Oh no, I think I already read this. I already went through this slide. Yeah. Okay, so let me just keep reading. So now we have verses 13-16. We have 1 Peter 1:19-20, and it says, but with the precious blood of Christ, as of a lamb without blemish and without spot, he indeed was foreordained before the foundation of the world, but was manifest in these last times for you. He came for us. John 1:29, the next day John saw Yashua coming toward him and said, behold, the Lamb of the Elohim who takes away the sin of the world. So again, we're reviewing connections within 13 and 16, or 13 and 15 rather, being speaking about the Lamb of the first year without blemish and the connection to Messiah. So we also have Revelation 13:8, and it says, all who dwell on the earth will worship him, whose names have not been written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. Every knee shall bow, right? And then Hebrews 10:1 through 10. I'm going to go ahead and read it. It says, for the law, having a shadow of the good things to come, and not the very image of the things, can never with these same sacrifices, which they offer continually year by year, make those who approach perfect. For then would they not have ceased to be offered? For the worshippers, once purified, would have had no more conscience of sin. But in those sacrifices, there is a reminder of sins every year. For it is not possible that the blood of bulls and goats could take away sins. Therefore, when he came into the world, he said, sacrifice and offering you did not desire, but a body you have prepared for me. In burnt offerings and sacrifices for sin you had no pleasure. Then I said, behold, I have come. In the volume of the book it is written of me, to do your will, O Elohim. Previously saying, sacrifice and offering, burnt offerings, and offerings for sin you did not desire, nor had pleasure in them, which are offered according to the law. Then he said, behold, I have come to do your will, O Elohim. He takes away the first that he may establish the second. By that we have been sanctified through the offering of the body of Yashaya HaMashiach once and for all. So the transference, very, very clear and evident in that portion there. Galatians 4:17, therefore you are no longer a slave, but a son, and if a son, then an heir of the Elohim through Messiah. And this speaks to the portion of the inheritance. So yes, verse 16 now. Thus says the Adon Elohim, if the prince gives a gift of some of his inheritance to any of his sons, it shall belong to his sons. It is their possession by inheritance. And we are sons and daughters, right? Romans 9:29 through 32. It says, and as Isaiah said before, unless the Adon of Sabaoth had left us a seed, we would have become like Sodom, and we would have been made like Gomorrah. What shall we say then? That Gentiles who did not pursue righteousness have attained to righteousness, even the righteousness of faith? But Israel, pursuing the law of righteousness, has not attained to the law of righteousness. Why? Because they did not seek it by faith, but as it were by the works of the law, for they stumbled at the stumbling stone. So we see obviously how they with their lips they proclaim his name, but their hearts are far from him, not truly manifesting the fruits of the Ruach in the way that our Messiah desires for us when we choose to follow him. John 8:35 through 36, and a slave does not abide in the house forever, but a son abides forever. Therefore, if the son makes you free, you shall be free indeed. So again, verse 16, propitiating that truth about being sons and daughters, children of the Elohim, and receiving that inheritance because of that. Yes, amen. Amen. I'm just trying to check where I am. Okay, so let's go to the last slide now. Sorry, let me. Okay. So we have here the prince and his land. So, what is the importance of the inheritance being kept within the prince's family and the prince not being able to take any property from the rest of the house of Israel? On acquisition of Israelite territories and inheritance issues, we see in various areas that I believe I included some of these precepts so we can read through them as well. I found this graphic here, which has a lot of information, and you kind of have to like zoom in order to be able to see it properly. But it's like a map along with seems like a timeline as well. It's not there. It's not there. It's not there, and I'm not doing that right now. Yes, I said yes. Toby, I'm right now is not. Just call me. Okay, I'm sorry. You shouldn't be on. I'm sorry. Give me a second, you guys. Sorry. Okay. So, and then the last one, well, actually, let me go back here. So this, like I said, it has kind of like a timeline with descriptions. We see the lake of fire down here, the bottomless pit, the last revolt over here after the millennial reign. We see the day of the Antichrist. I don't know. I just thought that this was pretty cool how everything is kind of broken down. And then we see the descriptions of New Jerusalem here, the Levites portion, the priestly portion, and yeah, so this was basically just to shine light on the inheritance, speaking about the inheritance and what that will look like, I guess you can say, for us. But who knows? This is just what the finite mind can interpret, right? We don't really have a clear picture of what that, I mean, just we have descriptions, but not something that's concrete of what that all is going to look like in that day. All right, and then lastly, the importance of the kitchens. So why should Ezekiel be shown the kitchens in the temple, and why should these be mentioned for us? So we see in Ezekiel 46:19 through 24 that it's speaking of where the priests would be placing their offerings. So it says, "This is the place where the priest shall boil the guilt offering and the sin offering, and where they shall bake the grain offering, in order not to bring them out into the outer court and so transmit holiness to the people." It's significant because temples of the ancient Near East were places for the gods to feast, but not for the general population. But in the temple of the Adon, he prepares a table before his people and shares it with them. So we're going to read some connecting precepts there as well. And then, yeah, just another little visual there. All right, so okay, we'll do. I'll share that in the chat too. All right, so Deuteronomy 17:14 through 20. When you come to the land which the Adon your Elohim is giving you, and possess it and dwell in it, and say, I will set a king over me like all the nations that are around me, you shall surely set a king over you to whom the Adon your Elohim chooses. One from among your brethren you shall set as king over you. You may not set a foreigner over you who is not your brother, but he shall not multiply horses for himself, nor cause the people to return to Egypt to multiply horses. For the Adon has said to you, you shall not return that way again. Neither shall he multiply wives for himself, lest his heart turn away. Nor shall he greatly multiply silver and gold for himself. Also it shall be, when he sits on the throne of his kingdom, that he shall write for himself a copy of this law in a book, from the one before the priests the Levites. And it shall be with him, and he shall read it all the days of his life, that he may learn to fear the Adon his Elohim, and be careful to observe all the words of this law and these statutes, that his heart may not be lifted above his brethren, that he may not turn aside from the commandment to the right hand or to the left, and that he may prolong his days in his kingdom, he and his children in the midst of Israel. So we see a lot of again regulations of what the priest or the king is and is not to do. And what I find interesting is that they were called to literally copy word for word the law so that it would be inscribed in their minds. That's a way of learning. There are people who listen by hearing, there's people who listen by taking notes. So seems like this was an instruction that was being given by the Most High in order that the people who were in leadership would learn the law and live it out. And 2 Samuel 9:7 says, So David said to him, Do not fear, for I will surely show you kindness for Jonathan your father's sake, and will restore you all the land of Saul your grandfather, and you shall eat bread at my table continually. So this, of course, is David when he was speaking to Jonathan's son, who was a cripple, and promising him that he would receive the inheritance. So just a connection once again to speaking to the inheritance that's being mentioned. Then John 10:28, and it says, And I give them eternal life, and they shall never perish, neither shall anyone snatch them out of my hand. And this is the inheritance of all inheritances that we want to receive. Isaiah 32, 1 through 2. Behold, a king will reign in righteousness, and princes will rule with justice. A man will be as a hiding place from the wind and a cover from the tempest, as rivers of water in a dry place, as the shadow of a great rock in a weary land. And then Isaiah 11, 3 through 4. His delight is the fear of the Adon, and he shall not judge by the sight of his eyes, nor decide by the hearing of his ears. But with righteousness he shall judge the poor, and decide with equity for the meek of the earth. He shall strike the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips he shall slay the wicked. And that's our Messiah, our King. Psalm 72, 2 to 4. He will judge your people with righteousness and your poor with justice. The mountains will bring peace to the people and the little hills by righteousness. He will bring justice to the poor of the people. He will save the children of the needy and will break in pieces the oppressor. Just more confirmations about our Mashiach. Excuse me. 1 Samuel 2, 13 to 15. And the priest's custom with the people was that when any man offered a sacrifice, the priest's servant would come with a three-pronged flesh hook in his hand while the meat was boiling. Then he would thrust it into the pan, a kettle or cauldron or pot, and the priest would take for himself all that the flesh hook brought up. So they did in Shiloh to all the Israelites who came there. Also, before they burned the fat, the priest's servant would come and say to the man who sacrificed, Give meat for roasting to the priest, for he will not take boiled meat from you, but raw. So, the physical customs that were being used, let me go. Yeah, so this is just, making connections with the way that they would do the offerings and the customs that they were following. John 21, 15 through 17. So when they had eaten breakfast, Yasha said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me more than these? He said to him, Yes, Adon, you know that I love you. He said to him, Feed my lambs. He said to him again a second time, Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me? He said to him, Yes, Adon, you know that I love you. He said to him, Tend my sheep. He said to him the third time, Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me? Peter was grieved because he said to him the third time, Do you love me? And he said, Adon, you know all things. You know that I love you. Yasha said to him, Feed my sheep. So this is connecting to the last precept here. And he said to me, These are the kitchens where the ministers of the temple shall boil the sacrifices of the people, and feeding his sheep. As we are the royal priesthood, we would also be those priests who are using our fish hook to grab the meat and be fed. through the service of others as well. Matthew 24:45. Who then is a faithful and wise servant whom his master made ruler over his household to give them food in due season? Just another excerpt. Speaking of who is the faithful and wise servant. So who is the priest of the house? Psalm 23:5. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup runs over. So just a connection to what he will do for us. Those of his who are seeking him, seeking his kingdom and its righteousness, so that everything else that is needed will be added unto us. I did also include the parable of the wedding supper. So I'm going to go ahead and read through it because we have time. And Yasha answered and spoke to them again by parables and said, the kingdom of heaven is like a certain king who arranged a marriage for his son and sent out his servants to call those who were invited to the wedding, and they were not willing to come. Again, he sent out other servants, saying, tell those who are invited, see, I have prepared my dinner, my oxen and fatted cattle are killed, and all things are ready. Come to the wedding. But they made light of it and went their ways, one to his own farm, another to his business. And the rest seized his servants, treated them spitefully, and killed them. But when the king heard about it, he was furious. And he sent out his armies, destroyed those murderers, and burned up their city. Then he said to his servants, the wedding is ready, but those who were invited were not worthy. Therefore go into the highways, and as many as you find, invite to the wedding. So those servants went out to the highways and gathered together all whom they found, both bad and good. And the wedding hall was filled with guests. But when the king came in to see the guests, he saw a man there who did not have on a wedding garment. So he said to him, friend, how did you come in here without a wedding garment? And he was speechless. Then the king said to the servant, bind him hand and foot, take him away and cast him into outer darkness. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth, for many are called, but few are chosen. Yes, this parable never gets old. I actually didn't notice, and maybe this is just this translation, maybe others as well, that he calls him friend, the one who's not wearing the right garments. Very interesting. And then Revelation 3:20, behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in to him and dine with him, and he with me. Lastly, Revelation 19:9, then he said to me, write, blessed are those who are called to the marriage supper of the Lamb. And he said to me, these are the true sayings of the Elohim. So this is what we're striving for, to be invited to the wedding supper of the Lamb. As I said in the beginning of the study, to be the bride who was made ready with her garments without blemish, just awaiting the return of our King. This is our blessed hope, our goal, what we are striving to do on this earth and living it out day by day. With that being said, this concludes our study for tonight. As always, I pray that this was of edification and that you were able to learn something, take something away that would cause transformation and change. Remember that everything is a heart matter, so always check your heart and ensure that what you're doing, the motives that you have in this walk, in this life, is to please Him and to live for Him.